People across Oklahoma are in information gathering mode, trying to decide how to vote on November 8th.
You know, Thomas Jefferson said that you need a fully informed society to keep democracy safe. And we can talk about being worried about terrorism and nuclear bombs and all of that, a lot of things that are maybe beyond our control, but this is something we have control over. We can inform ourselves to a greater extent to be more informed, as Jefferson suggested, when we go into the ballot box.
To help people get informed about State Question 777, we caught up with the experts, Oklahoma State University's Ag Policy Specialist Larry Sanders and Ag Law Specialist Shannon Ferrell.
Okay, so when we're talking about State Question 777, the purpose of that question is to figure out whether or not the state's going to enact a new constitutional amendment. So that's important to remember, is that this would actually be an addition of new language to the state constitution. And what that amendment would say is that farmers, ranchers, and other sorts of agricultural producers have a right to use modern agricultural practices and technology in their operations. Now, the consequence of that is that we're making it a constitutional right. So that's something that's got a much higher level of protection than other rights that you might just get from statute. And so part of the statutory language says that the legislature can't pass a statute interfering with those rights unless there's a compelling state interest. So that means that we can still regulate things in state law, maybe, for example, water quality, environmental issues, things of that sort. But what the legislature now has to do is show that there is an important state interest at play, public safety, public health and welfare, those sorts of things, before they would be allowed to actually go ahead and enact and enforce that new statute.
Now, as I understand it, there is an existing statute on the books. Can you talk about that?
We do have an existing right to farm statute, and what that statute does is protect farmers and ranchers from nuisance lawsuits. The way our current statute is worded, it says that if you've been engaged in a certain agricultural practice for 2 years, and that practice is being conducted in compliance with all of the applicable laws, then there's a presumption that your activity doesn't constitute a nuisance to your neighbors.
We're moving from a nuisance law to something that is all-encompassing about what it protects, but there are still exemptions.
If it passes, exemptions would include trespass, eminent domain, easements, right-of-way and other property rights, and legislation that was passed before December 31st, 2014.
If the future activities may cause problems through any of those avenues, then this constitutional amendment is probably not going to provide that additional layer of protection.
Sanders says that it may, however, be discussed and considered through the court system, and likely would evolve over time as case law, after judges determine what's appropriate or inappropriate based upon the Oklahoma Constitution.
We are citizens, and the more informed we are, the better we do at policy work. We are all part of that process, and we can choose to not be involved, or we can choose to be very involved. There are people on both sides of this issue that are very involved in interest groups where they want to see that either this is defeated or that it passes. And then there's the rest of us that are somewhere in that zone of between don't care and maybe care, but we don't have a lot of time to invest.
What have other states done in terms of constitutional amendments, and what kind of questions could arise here if this passes?
Missouri and North Dakota have both passed constitutional amendments that are worded similar to the proposed language that you'd see in State Question 777. There's some differences. For example, in Oklahoma's proposed amendment, we have the compelling state interest language that provides an exception for the legislature if there is a compelling state interest there. We haven't seen any court cases make it through the system with respect to those other amendments, so there's really not much of a basis for us to say what's been the outcome of those amendments. And that might be that those amendments have kind of just quieted the landscape, and really there's not much controversy there anymore, or maybe just it's going to be a matter of time before we see those controversies arise. Another question that we've seen arise is, this is a state constitutional amendment, but if there are changes in laws at the federal level, how will federal courts interpret our constitutional amendment, and how will state and federal law be reconciled if the amendment does get passed?
Obviously, there's a lot to this, more than we can cover in a few minutes' time in a TV segment, correct?
Yeah, there are lots of questions out there, and we encourage everyone to really do their homework, find out how they feel about the issues and answer some of the questions for themselves about what this amendment can and can't do.
Okay, thank you very much, Shannon. And for more information, Shannon and Larry have co-authored this fact sheet. We have a link for you on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.